Welcome to Becoming Spiritual, a podcast about the magic that surrounds us and has always been a part of us. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, a passionate seeker dedicated to bringing together beautiful humans who are doing amazing things in this world. Together, we will explore healing modalities and practical spiritual practices that can enrich your everyday life. We will also hear stories of awakenings, many from people in the corporate world who have broken out of the spiritual closet. Wherever you are in your journey, know you have found a community of open-hearted individuals committed to making themselves and our world a better place. Welcome home. Hello, and welcome back to Becoming Spiritual. I'm your host, Heather Dolan, and I'm here with my spiritual sidekick, Natalie Grace. And we are so excited to have Angela Bixby here with us today. Angela is the founder of Energy Intuit and creatrix of the Conscious Psychic program, and has been helping to normalize human psychic abilities for over a decade. A consciousness mentor and a trance channeler of higher dimensional beings, Angela helps humans in many ways. Welcome, Angela.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Heather and Natalie.
We are very excited to dive into this conversation about psychic abilities. I can't think of anyone better to have on to share on this topic. And just a little background before we kind of dive into your background. I've had the opportunity to see Angela in action, both in a private setting as well as in a group setting where Angela has channeled for groups. She has shared a lot of her wisdom and helped me navigate a couple of things personally, working with her one-on-one. I have not experienced her Conscious Psychic program, and I'm going to say yet, because I would love to participate in that, and we're going to learn more about that today. But Angela, if you could just share a bit with us about your background and how you came to be a psychic, but also it would be great to even start with, how do you define for our audience who might be new to what being psychic means? How would you define that?
Great question. And yes, it would be my pleasure. Thanks, Heather. To define psychic, I would say, people are really familiar with the term mediumship and people being a medium, right? Which is wonderful. I love how present this all is now in the mainstream. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, certainly 14 years ago when I started this work, it was not as common for people to know what a medium or a psychic was or to be talking about it. And it's just, it's really kind of exploded in a beautiful way, which I'm grateful for. I would say, a psychic is one thing. A psychic would be someone who uses their psychic gifts to be of service to people, right? But in terms of being psychic, I would say that it's a skill set that we all have. I talk about it as being a bit of a lost skill set in that this time in history and our culture, Western culture, does not see it as a viable skill set, but it really truly is. We're all psychic. We all have a pineal gland and a pituitary gland in our brain and a physical body. Those three things render us psychic. Now, the question becomes, how does it express through each of us? Because we're all different.
Right.
And, bioindividuality, I use that term a lot. Just that, there are individual differences between all of us in all of this. And people are often surprised to realize that a lot of ways that they already experience the world are probably through what I would call their psychic pathways. So psychicness is very similar to, say, musical ability or sports ability. There's a spectrum. Someone may be born a really good athlete, and someone may have to work really hard to learn how to throw a ball. Someone may be, born a composer at the age of 3, and some may have to work really hard to learn how to sing or play an instrument. And psychic skills are the same way. So we've all got them. It's a matter of kind of coming into the realization that you have them, and then deciding or sort of figuring out how that might express for you. And then when you talk about developing them or honing them, I always recommend working with your sort of most dominant or prominent clair or psychic skill, and then kind of building them out from there. So for instance, with clairvoyance, which clairvoyance, clair is a prefix that's put on a lot of psychic words. It's French in nature. It means clear, basically. So clairvoyance means clear seeing. And clairvoyance can take shape or can express in many different ways. It can be that we are seeing a full-scale apparition in front of us with our eyes open, although that is much rarer than all of the other ways that clairvoyance expresses. That's becoming more common as the consciousness of the planet is raising and people are having a lot more spontaneous psychic experiences. But mostly clairvoyance is best explained as the same pathways as our imagination in our brain. So if you were having a conversation with a friend, Heather, on the phone, are you sort of actively visualizing it in your head when you're having that conversation?
Yeah, for sure. Especially if they're sharing
Excellent.
details. I'm thinking about if they're telling me a story about what happened on the weekend or their kids or something. I'm definitely, I'm picturing what that would be like. So that's using a
Exactly.
psychic.
Right. That's your clairvoyance. When you're reading
Right.
a book, are you sort of picturing that whole scene as well?
Yeah.
Same pathway. So I call
Fascinating.
that, I'm kind of getting in deep here fast, but I call that map eye because at the age of 57, I'd learned to drive before GPS systems and before, all
Same.
of the apps. And so I would look at a physical map and then sort of hold a picture of that map in the back of my head while I was driving. So while I'm engaged, my brain is safely engaged with the task of driving. You have sort of that secondary skill set running where this is how I describe it. I have kind of a map in the back of my head that I'm also looking at while I'm driving. And so that is one of the most common ways that clairvoyance expresses. And people just don't notice it. We're so busy that they're often running through the world and don't realize that they sort of have these pictures or this movie reel running kind of in the back of their head. And they certainly don't usually identify it as their clairvoyance. So
Sure.
that would be one of the biggest kind of surprises and hopefully normalization of this process for your audience that I can offer when I'm talking about being psychic. Now, what I would say about mediumship or being a medium is,
Oh, wait, can we go back before we jump into that? Because, yes, I definitely want you to share a little bit about the differences when you say medium, because as I was saying, I actually wasn't differentiating them. So I definitely want you to do that for us. But I loved how you brought it to such an easy way to understand, talking about everyone having psychic skills and how we are born with certain abilities. And that just rings so true for me because, as you know, one of the pillars of this podcast is learning how people came to the spirituality, if it started at a young age, like Natalie's experience, or was later in life. For me, I know that was your story as well, which we're going to go into in a few minutes. But that's just so tangible for people to understand because we all have someone in our life or a family member who has these gifts that they're a natural born athlete no matter what they do. That was my sister. I would get so upset, and we're identical twins. So a little competitive, she would just pick up a tennis racket and was instantly better than me. And I was playing for, like 2 years. So that's just so interesting. I've never really thought of it that way. It's just very relatable. So I appreciate you sharing that because I think it puts things in perspective that, yes, there are people who are born with these tremendous musical talents at like 2 and 3, and they're expressing them.
yeah, of course. I'm really glad to hear that. Another one that I would add to that is because I think so many people have had this experience, certainly, is if you have a song stuck in the back of your head, or what we call, at least in this country, sometimes an earworm, right? It happens a lot. Well, I notice it if I wake up with a song in my head, because usually my mind's pretty clear when I wake up, but that's our clear audience. There's a song running in the back of your head. I would love to tell you and your audience that
Yeah.
if you hear something like that moving through your day, just pause, pay attention to what it is. There's a message in it, whether it's in the lyrics of the song or the certain stanza that maybe you're hearing on repeat of a song, or there's a message in the title of the song, or there's a message in the band name of the song. And so that's one of the ways that we can be working with our clairaudience too. That's just happening for people all of the time.
And again, so relatable. This happened to me last week. Literally couldn't get a song from Frozen out of my head because my daughter was in the show. And I'm talking like 3 days. This song would not leave me. So finally, I had the sense to say, okay, guides, who's trying to give me a message? What does this mean? And I was able to sit with it for a little bit. And then it was like, oh, it just came to me. And it was, all right, message received. It was gone.
Well illustrated.
So,
Yes,
yeah,
it's like that.
Yeah.
What I love about you sharing that is you also demonstrate how persistent spirit or our guides or all of the unseen realms, however we want to refer to it, but how persistent they are until the message is delivered. And so it was 3 days until you were able to go, wait a
Yeah.
minute, this is happening for a reason, and pause and sort of inquire within yourself in that beautiful way. And then you talking about it disappearing right away. That's exactly how this goes. Especially messages that like spirit really wants us to get. They'll stick around and hang around like that until we acknowledge them and kind of get the message. So I was trained formally in the Spiritualist Church of New York in 2010. There's things at a psychic school. And so I would go, I live in the Philadelphia area. I would drive up to New York, 1 weekend a month for a year and train and study there in person. And it's the Spiritualist Church, which is also the church that came over sort of from England in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So it's very established, what I would call traditional mediumship. And it's, there's a history with what it was going on in the late 19th century, early 20th century, was when mediumship, as it was called then, was very dramatic. And it needed to be for people to believe it. That's when table tipping would happen and the knocks on the cabinets and things like that, right? It was an ectoplasm, which is physical evidence, of that spirits had been there. I mean, it had much more of a dramatic component, really, because that's where we were as a planet and as a species evolutionarily with this stuff. And so fast forward now, 130 years later, what have you, we're in a very, very different climate. And still the Spiritualist Church of New York, as far as I was trained, defines mediumship as connecting to any of the unseen realms, any kind of spirit that's unseen. So whether it be a person, a passed on loved one, or a spirit guide, or an alien, a higher dimensional being, really that's all mediumship. What we know of it on the planet is people tend to identify mediumship as speaking with passed on loved ones. So it's a little bit more than that. But again, this is semantics. But it's one of the entry points for people into this, right? Especially if they see any of the wonderful shows on TV of, Long Island Medium.
Tyler Henry now.
Yeah, Tyler Henry, Medium, Monica the Media. There's so many, which is great because it just brings it all up it helps to normalize it in society. So
exactly.
I make that distinction because a lot of people sort of think that psychic mediums only talk to passed on loved ones. And there's a lot more that we can do with our psychic skills and ways that we can use it in our daily life. And you illustrated that well with what happened to you with that song and that you realized there was a message there for you. It's a great example of like practical application of psychic skills.
Yeah. Which like I said, I wouldn't have thought of that as a psychic skill. I don't know how I would categorize it. I hadn't thought about it, but building on your experience of going to psychic school in your 40s, later on in life, can you share a little bit how you kind of came to making that decision to go to psychic school? Because as I mentioned, you're not someone who came in at 2 years old with this ability and just was raring to go. So it took some time. So if you could share a little bit about your journey of how you have gotten to this place, that would be great.
It would be my pleasure. So I was not seeing dead people as a child. I was not one of those. I was psychic my whole life, but I didn't realize it until I got to psychic school in my 40s. And so I'll go back to childhood. I was born and raised on the West Coast. So it had not hippie parents, but pretty cool parents. And I was hit by a car when I was 7 and had an out-of-body experience, had a near-death experience. And, even old school, I say in the late 20th century, it was thought that you only came by these skills by having some physical trauma like that. So, but it wasn't just that. But I will say that, that was a big part of my history that people are curious about. Did you have some kind of an accident that shook this into you? If it did, I didn't realize it for another 34 years or so, but perhaps. But I was always really emotional. And I would just know things. For instance, I was traveling with my dad and my family when I was a young teen before I was driving in a country I'd never been. And he was asking me to navigate with the map, but even without that, I was not using the map, but I was just telling him kind of intuitively where to turn. And he was like, how did you figure that out? So I would have these things happen, or maybe somebody would come over to the house that was upset and all of a sudden I would be crying, and everybody's like, why is Angie always crying? And so so those things were happening for me, and I didn't realize until retrospectively later, decades later, what was going on. As I moved through my life and came to the East Coast by way of the Midwest quite a while ago, I've been here 33 years or something, but so the East Coast is more home now for me than West Coast. But as I made my way through life and, university and got married and had kids, I had very traditional work. I was always interested in this stuff. And I had, meditating in college and yoga and all of that. I'd always had an interest in sort of Eastern thought type stuff and philosophy, and really wished I was psychic. And so fast forward to my mid-30s when I was going through a big life change. I was going through a divorce. And at that time, I felt like I had a lot more freedom to explore this stuff. And I did. And I remember sitting with a woman who's a shaman and having a session with her. And I just kept, she could just tell I just really wanted to be psychic and to be able to do what she was doing. And I know she was kind of rolling her eyes at me, knowing that we're all psychic. Nonetheless, I had so at that time, in that time period, I was asking for it, wishing I had it, all of those things. Was meditating a lot. It was doing a lot of things that were really of interest to me, which is all of these metaphysical things. I just have always been hobby and passion and all of that for me my whole life. So I started having experiences where that were unusual for me. Like I woke up one night and the bed was being shook by spirits and I could feel it. And I'm someone who's not typically afraid of anything. It's just kind of part of how I am. Scorpio moon, I think, is part of that. But nonetheless, I was like, okay, you've got my attention. What's going on? I called that, friend that was the shaman and was like, what's going on? And she said, yeah, well, you're kind of waking up spiritually. A few months later, I had a similar thing happen that was a little less scary. And she said, there was a flat screen TV on the wall. And she said to me, okay, you're going to channel. You are going to find a class that's nearby. And it's affordable at this time, single mom with a couple of kids and a day job. And she said, you're going to find this. You're going to go on the weekends. It's going to be doable for you. And there you go. You're going to be a channeler. So I really, in early 2010, I didn't know what I was looking for when I searched on the internet for channel. I was like, channeling school, channeling classes. And I found Holistic Studies Institute in New York, which is where I went to school. There was a class, Psychic Development 1, running 10 days later. I didn't have the kids, didn't have plans. It was affordable. Boom. And that's how it started. So it was in that first class. And I had worked through my career being really dissatisfied. I'd been in healthcare sales and marketing, just trying to find what felt right for me. And nothing really felt right. So I had been very open to what might feel right when it comes to me. So that when I landed in my first psychic class, I went, this is it. And then I was like, this is it? How am I going to do this? What am I going to do with it? I don't know. But I just had a really deep knowing that it was it. And it was in that first class that I realized I had been claircognizant, the knowing things, the being able to be a, co-pilot to my dad as a non-driver, and an empath my whole life, that extra emotionality, responding to everybody's emotions around me and nobody being able to figure out why, right? So I like to tell people, my parents were really cool and I grew up in California, but even they didn't feel equipped for whatever the heck was going on with me. So that's when I really went, okay, I'm psychic. And I was 42 or 3 or something at the time.
Yeah. And then kind of moving ahead a little bit to the day job, having this day job, going to psychic school on the weekend, then how things kind of unfolded for you. Because not everyone's journey is to jump full force into whatever modality they love or they're attracted to or they find of interest. It might be, like you said, a hobby. But for you, it was kind of a different story. Spirit had different plans, was going to let you know that this was it. This was going to be your calling. So can you share a little bit about how that came about?
Yes. So I, with a lot of other new friends that I made in psychic school, we created our LLCs. We're talking about throughout the whole year of our training, what we're going to do with these skills. Opened up my business in January of 11 and was seeing clients a couple nights a week and on the weekends when I didn't have my kids. So kind of ramping it up slowly, was, exploring, doing all of the things of being a business owner while also working full time. And then it hit some more momentum and some more traction. And my plan was to, finish working, maybe leave my day job at the end of 2013. In February of 2013, so 12 years ago, I was at an event with one of my favorite spiritual teachers. His name is Derek O'Neill. He's a transformational psychologist. He's Irish, works in Ireland. He does a ton of wonderful things and feeds lots of people around the world with his work and mission and such. At the time, he was doing a workshop in New York, and I had the honor of being able to ask questions of him in between sessions. And so I explained to him, I've been starting this job. I know it's my calling. It feels really good. I can't wait to not be an employee again. Do you have any advice for when might be a good time to kind of know when the time is to jump ship? And he was great. He said, listen, you have to go common sense over spiritual sense. He said, you just told me you're a single mom and you've got 2 teenage boys. Like, you have mouths to feed, you have bills to pay. So even though you know this is what you're meant to do, and you've now been doing it for a couple of years, Angela, you really have to make sure that you've got the bills paid when you shed your day job. And I had a knowing in my body then that it was probably coming sooner than I thought, but I also felt really supported by his advice. And I've given so many of my clients that advice. And you and I have talked about that, Heather, because we know, we both, I think we all know people that have had that call and then feel like it means a lot. It means a lot, but then they feel like they can just leave their job and they'll be supported. And that can get really hard, for people. Yeah. It takes time, it's like anything. So I shed my day job in April of that year, and it was against my will, but it's just sort of how the universe did it. But I knew when I was in that situation, I was not stressed. I was actually really relieved and really peaceful, and was able to navigate that, parting from that company in a really professional and righteous way without it being really upsetting for me, because it's ultimately what I wanted, and I felt ready to step into my business full time, and I've been doing it full time ever since.
Do you feel like you manifested that?
Sure. I don't think about it like that, though. I tend to hang out in my humility. Yeah, but I don't describe it that way.
No.
Because I wasn't sitting around thinking, I'm going to manifest a business. I'm going to manifest what's right for me. Mm-hmm. I was kind of in that point of attraction of like, I'm going to attract it in, and I'm going to trust that whatever I'm supposed to be doing with this will sort of guide me, that I'll kind of get each of the steps. I was never asking for the big picture and the title. And I just, before I found psychic school, I felt like I had some ideas of things that I loved, and I was trying to kind of go down those roads, and they just wouldn't go anywhere. And this was just this feeling of like, oh, this is what I meant to do. Yeah. So with that feeling, I didn't have as much pressure on it and thinking in terms of like, oh, I manifested this. It's hard to explain, and that's a great question that you ask, but you're getting the wheels turning here about taking me back to that time.
Well, so I think because manifestation is coming into like regular conversation. Everyone, you see it on Instagram ads, you see it all over social media, manifestation classes and courses and meditations, and how can we manifest things? And I think people miss a lot of the signs of things falling into place. And like you said, it even just knowing that something feels good, it comes with grace and ease, it flows. You're going to keep attracting more of that the more things feel good. And a lot of times we tend to just think, no, I need this or I need that. And then people are upset it's not coming. And chances are it's not in alignment. It's not meant for you, or at least at this time, potentially. So I love how you can envision that. And in the work I do in my day job, in my corporate job, where I'm supporting people who have lost their jobs, for me now, I have such a different perspective of it is the universe giving people an opportunity. As hard as it is, one of the hardest things people can experience in their lives. It is a loss, and I don't take that lightly. But at the same time, I also know that it means that there's something else out there for them. Either that organization was in alignment with their values, the people they were working for, the environment, the work life. They want to explore more things on the weekend, like you were doing, other likes and interests. And usually when I dig in a little bit, they're like, well, I'm sad. They're sad because it happened to them and it wasn't their choice. They didn't have control. But on the other side of it, it's always, oh my gosh, that was really the best thing that happened to me, because they ended up in a much better place, but can go through some bumps and some pain along the way.
Absolutely. Thinking back to your question about manifestation, part of why I don't think about it like that is because we're all always manifesting. And when I think about turning towards manifestation practices, and like you said, that's really in the zeitgeist and hot and people are into it, it's more of, I just didn't think about it like that because I had been so deeply open to whatever wanted to come would come, right? And we are all always manifesting. So yes, I totally manifested this. And to the point of what you're saying about your day job and the work that you do, I'm happy to be vulnerable and frank here and say, until a couple of years before I landed in psychic school, if I left jobs, it was by my choice. I was looking for what made me happy. I had never been fired from a job. I started getting fired from jobs. I got fired 4 times. The last time that I told you guys about was the 4th time. Wow. So in a couple of year period, once I started psychic school, it's almost like the universe just sped things up. And they would just find some random reason to fire me. And I'd be like, oh my God, I still need to work though. And so I had that experience. It might have even been, I could be misremembering. I might have gotten fired once before psychic school. So it was kind of like the beginning of like, I got to figure out what this thing is. And so my life circumstances and the universe, by coming in and these employers and being like, you're not supposed to be here in healthcare sales and marketing. There's a bigger place for you. You just haven't found it yet. It was a bigger manifestation that, yes, it was absolutely happening. And yes, I had the signs similar to when you dig in with your clients in your day job, of knowing that I wasn't happy. I've described that to you guys a couple of different ways already in this conversation, right? So yeah, of course the universe was responding to that and it was manifested. I just don't think about it that way. That's all.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I love what you said too about feeling like something was missing, and then kind of that you get there and it's like, oh my gosh, I can take a deep breath. It's like a feeling of home, of being home, of feeling like you found your place and you finally fit in. And I talk a little bit about my journey and that being the case too. So you're in this psychic program wanting to be psychic and you kind of get your dream. And what was it like when you first started receiving messages, for someone who's like, I don't know, maybe I can relate to the song thing. We can relate to maybe some other ways that we might be using some psychic skills. But for you, when you started receiving, messages or downloads where it was not just here's a song, here's something that pops up on the TV when you happen to walk by and it's just random and out of nowhere. What was that like for you?
Great question. So first I'll say that I'm living proof that psychic skills are trainable, because there I was in psychic school and didn't know that I was psychic. And I've already, as I shared earlier, found out that I had been claircognizant and empathic my whole life. And so I had to build out and grow my clairvoyance and my clairaudience. They were not in my awareness online when I started psychic school. And so when I was in psychic school, when you're in person, especially, although I do it all online and have now for 8 years, but at that time it was in person. And you can imagine if you're sitting in a room in a circle with people, with teachers, it generates a lot of energy and it's easier to call in a lot of guides. So my experiences when I was in class were honestly just little glimpses. It was a lot more of a knowing and that emotional feeling. And that was a hard way to start because I didn't have the big, oh my gosh, I'm seeing this image in my mind's eye, or I'm hearing this clear voice talking to me. So I needed to have that depth of like, wow, I'm really glad I found what I'm supposed to do, because now I get to work really hard to grow these skills. And it isn't, for some people, it's simple and it can be quicker. To be frank, I had like a lot of healing that I had to do. I had to plumb a lot of stuff within myself, a lot of programming, patterns and things. And there was a lot of sort of personal healing work for me that came along with it. And I would see every once in a while on my mind's eye with my eyes closed in that first year. It really, the axiom that like we get more of what we focus upon is so true. And so I worked at it all the time. I loved it so much. I was glad it was a passion. I was glad I can get mildly obsessive with stuff, because it got me doing yoga and meditation daily for 1.5 years. Just really setting up those structures for myself to succeed, practicing a lot, doing all the things I could that I knew would help that. Meditation is one of the biggest things people can do. And so it wasn't super fantastic, Heather, sincerely, it was exciting when I felt and knew that I was right. But when you're developing psychically, especially as an adult with maybe a lot of layers of baggage, like lots of us have, it's life.
Of course.
Before we realize that, the confidence is really the more important piece rather than the skill building. It's so easy if you're not inside like a structured program or with a teacher or something, or working with a mentor or with a development group or something, it's really easy to just go, oh, that was nothing. I'm just going to brush it off. And so again, through the process of developing, it was more longitudinal over time. And I would have like little bits of that excitement when things come in. But that was also part of a structure that I put in place to kind of work my way through this, to build this skill. And so it wasn't sudden. It wasn't overnight for me. And it took a lot of personal work and then a lot of training and then a lot of practice since. So Now, fast forward 14 years, a totally different place on the planet for a lot of reasons that some are very rooted in science and the electromagnetic fields around the Earth and the sun and the moon. It's a lot easier. Telepathy has gone up. The consciousness of the planet is raising. So there are possibly people that are having a lot more. I know there are because I have a lot of clients that this is happening and students. And so there are people that are having more spontaneous like experiences or more, all of a sudden they're hearing a voice when they're walking through the store. And again, because it's more welcomed in society, people are talking about it. People are paying more attention to it. So for me, it was less fantastic than it might sound.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure to normalize that for everyone, that it can be work, focusing on the skills and really working on it. Once you hit a certain tipping point, I would say, and maybe Natalie, I bet you'll agree with this, spirit meets you more than halfway. So you keep going with that confidence and showing up respectfully, reverently, and things can really take off and grow really fast. And that's exciting. I will say, to kind of circle back to a more solid answer to your question, Heather, it's been this long, 14 years, and I am so delighted. I just had a big download yesterday, right? Like I just keep having really, really big and cool experiences, and that's a lot of the joy of developing. Is for me, I'm like, I may not be in touch with that first message that I received, but I know that I'm going to be excited about these messages that I'm receiving for the rest of my life because that's the reality that I've been living. So it's really satisfying, really deeply satisfying. And it took me a while to get to that place with the actual joy of the messages coming through in the way that you might be asking about.
Yeah, for sure. And as I had shared with you previously, I was reading a book about how to receive messages because I was in that place of questioning, and I did have a community to kind of ask, but it's a weird question because you think, I don't know, how am I getting these messages? And am I really getting a message? And am I just making that up, that something just popped into my head? And it's, now I know. But at the time I thought, that's just your imagination, or it's what I want the answer to be. So I'm kind of making this appear in my mind. And so when I was reading a book about psychic skills or mediumship and got to the page where she said, when you get messages, it is not going to be this big booming voice of God like we kind of are taught when we're kids who grow up in religious families where we might be going to church, and there's kind of all these ways of communication. And in my mind, I was taught, it's kind of like God speaks to people, and it's this, male voice. And so I thought I was going to have this experience that if I was really getting messages, and I had never asked anyone, that it would be coming through in some other type of voice. And when she said it's your voice, it's not going to be something separate. And I know people do get other voices, but in terms of this with our own psychic skills, that was the big aha for me. And so I'm guessing there's some other people that probably need to hear that as well.
Big time. Yeah, very well said.
And Natalie, I'm curious about you. Like, I want to hear about how you receive messages. I've never really asked you. I just know they're coming in because when we're talking, you're getting information. When you do lives and you're sharing information with the collective, whether it's through tarot or something else, I know you're things are coming in. You're getting messages. You're tapping into the field. So I'm curious, how do you receive?
Yeah, I have that strong claircognizance. So Angela mentioned that before, that just deep knowing. And that whole tipping point you mentioned, Angela, is profound because I think that's the point where you just have complete trust in yourself. And when you get to that point, I'm getting like shivers right now because it's true for everyone.
Me too.
Everything just opens up and there's no resistance anymore. So the leading up to that resistance is a process of the universe, your guides, your higher self, giving you all this evidence that you have these skills, you have these powers, and they're innate within every one of us. The process of remembering is just different. It's unique for each and every one of us as we go on our journeys. But once you have enough evidence, you can't doubt it anymore. All of a sudden, you have complete trust in your intuition and you get information through lots of different ways. So it might sound way out if this is a new journey for you, but I really do feel like I'm like an open vessel. And I do hear stuff sometimes. I see things, but not the way you'd expect. And I have a question specifically about this for you in a sec, Angela. But if I visualize myself, it's like I've got an open channel, mostly from the top, but also from the bottom. And messages just flow in and I receive them, and my job here is to share them and communicate them. So, like receive them, kind of perceive them, understand them, unpack them, and share them with responsibility as well. I like really hold that important, that you have to be responsible with information you share. But yeah, like that's how I receive it. And it's a little bit harder to explain that because it's not always voices and it's not always visions. But something that I do see, and I'm very interested if you could share a bit, Angela, about the different types of experiences that you've witnessed, not just for yourself, but for your students as they're going through this awakening process for themselves. I see things, I don't see people, I don't see scenes in my in my clear vision. I can see energy though. So I'll see balls of light. I'll see things moving. I will see something else I think that might be quite common. If I'm not really focused, but I'm looking at the sky, I might see things in my periphery that look very far away, but I believe that they are actually there. And it's not just like, my eyes or whatever. So I'm really curious to hear from you, like, what are the other common experiences that aren't just like what we read about in books or see in the movies around being psychic and having those skills opening up?
Great question. Great question. A couple of things. First of all, the way that you experience, I love hearing how you experience your psychic skills. It's awesome. It's variable. So if, we're talking about clairvoyance or clairseeing, yes, seeing balls of light. Do you see them with your eyes closed or in your mind's eye, Natalie?
I actually see them with my eyes open. I see them in my physical space, and I will.
Excellent.
And this is a shared experience I have with my partner as well. He sees similar, so we'll share notes. And before we might have thought it was nothing, because you can see like a shadow moving or a white ball moving across your space very quickly, and just be like, oh, that's just a figment of my imagination.
Or
reflection, something like that. But after a while, I'm like, no, I'm sensing something, and I'm actually seeing it in my field. It's just not what I expect it to see, because it's something different to our physical reality, but it's here manifested in this light way. So that's how I perceive that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. And a lot of times I and clients will see like silvery light or sort of like, glittery light running through the room. Yeah, all of that. Light balls, little flecks, little sparks. People might sort of feel the energy in the room change from time to time. People might be like a little bit dizzy for a moment, or feel a little bit like their head, have kind of a bubble head. People a lot of times hearing things in the back of their head, like the earworm, like we talked about. But one of the things that I'm struck with, and I really want to ask you, Natalie, is, do you engage with what you're experiencing, or do you just sort of receive it and then deliver the messages?
That's a really good question, because I think this is also part of my developmental journey, where perhaps I don't have the confidence or the skills yet to know how to do that communication. So I receive information, but it's so far for me, it's not usually a conversation. And the times where I've tried to have that conversation or that interaction, it goes away. And I think that perhaps is where my doubt barrier is, and I still have some work to do.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I would say, I respect what you're saying, and you're the best, yourself the best. I would say less doubt barrier, perhaps that's part of it. And that it's that quality of trying too hard, right? So when you turn to actually dive into it or have a conversation, you're probably excited, maybe, and sort of almost trying too hard. So the reason I asked you that question is because I teach, and I don't know anybody else that teaches this way, right? But mediumship that we talked about earlier and all of this stuff tends to be taught as like passively receiving it, right? And that's why so many people don't realize they're psychic unless they're having these experiences that we're talking about, or bigger experiences that you and I aren't having, the big, huge experiences, seeing the full scale apparition, what have you. They just think that they don't have it, because we've been taught through history and through culture that if you're not a saint, or you're touched, or you're crazy, or all the things, or that it's only for special people, right? We all have it. We're also taught that it's just sort of like you receive it or you don't. I teach directively, so I teach people like in my foundational basics. I give them when I teach them on your program, ask questions. So I would say to you, Natalie, when you see something like that, you know how to kind of work on that, like, detachment a little bit from the outcome and just sort of like engage in a casual conversation in your head. Oh, hello, nice to see you. Or if you're seeing something physically in your environment, what I encourage people to do is close your eyes or leave them open and just think to spirit, can you zoom in on that, please? Because more often than not, if you're seeing like a ball of light flying through the room, if you're able to zoom in on it, and the way that you want to be able to do that is you want to be able to have what I would call a soft gaze or a soft focus. You don't want a hard focus on it, which is what happens when you see things in your periphery or when other people see shadows. You go to turn to look at it directly, it goes away. So you want to kind of just be spacing out and like asking to zoom in on it, but not looking at it really hard. It's hard to explain it, but I think you get it.
Yeah.
And then you'll sort of see more message emerge, or you might see, I did that once with like a speck that I was seeing on my eye. And I'm like, what is this? A number of years ago. And all of a sudden it blew up and it was Jesus's face. And he's like, it's me. I'm showing you that I'm everywhere. Right. Like, and so guides, there are messages like that, like packets of information and all of these little things that you're experiencing. And so even if it feels a little bit like too much pressure, you're trying too hard in that moment when it happens, just write it down is my recommendation for you and the whole audience. Write it down. And then you kind of, when can be in a more neutral space, a little more detached, maybe then sit in meditation. And, hey, Spirit, when I saw that, the light flying through the living room last week, tell me more. What's that message? And be directive and start asking questions and engaging, because that's our birthright. Just as, we have boundaries with, say, we don't open up our windows and our screens and let all of the birds and the bugs fly through our house. We have structures in place. We close the window, we close the screens. It works in the other direction too. If there's something in our house, you have every right to be like, or an energy moving through your fields to say, hey, what are you? Let's talk. Tell me more about you. What's this about? Are you here for my highest good? It's really important. And that's part of how I find empowerment. And I teach people that, I help facilitate that empowerment through my program, because then people are really working on not just the skill building, but that confidence part. And being directive and saying, hey, you're kind of a stinky energy and I don't want you in my house. Get out of here. We have that right too. If something doesn't feel right in your atmosphere, just tell it to leave, even if that means thinking, leave now, you're scaring me, or whatever. Just leave now. Be directive and authoritative to send away icky feeling stuff, but also feel free to be directive in conversational and engage with what's showing up for you. Because it's spirit playing with us, and like they have messages and they want to say things. And so once people kind of learn that and realize that it's not being disrespectful or lacking reverence for spirit when we say, hey, tell me more, let's talk about that, then it's so freeing for them. And then they're like, oh, okay, I just thought if I saw an image, that was the only message. So if someone's seeing an image on their mind's eye, maybe they're seeing an apple that's got wheels on it and it's driving down the road in their mind's eye. I say to them, ask it what it wants to tell you. And they're like, I can do that. And they'll say in their mind's eye, hello, apple, thanks for showing up. Is there more of a message? Yes, I'm here to tell you to eat more fruit, right? Or maybe something more metaphoric. But people are just so surprised when they do engage with things, and then they start getting the answers back through all of their psychic pathways again. Does that help, Natalie?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
Got a free little lesson here. So actually, I wanted to go back to when you were talking about the soft gaze, and if you see something not kind of directly looking at it, staring at it, like, oh my gosh, what did I see? Is that because it kind of clicks over to our logically thinking brain of like, I have to analyze this,
Completely.
shut it down? So
completely.
it's
Pop
kind of
it into the left side of your brain when you start to analyze it. And when you start to doubt it, or if you get a little fearful in it, all of those things will instantly, just like Natalie talked about, it's like it goes away.
Yeah. And I do remember at the first workshop where I met you talking about being directive. And I think that was really a bit of an aha moment for a lot of people there, thinking, oh, I can engage with this and I can ask questions. And then if it isn't going to answer me, I'm going to say, okay, don't want you in my space, or whatever it is, because it's maybe not for the highest good. So I love that you shared that, because I think a lot of people probably wouldn't think that you can do that. You just think, oh, this thing's here and I have no choice. It's just going to exist around me or whatever. Can you tell us a little bit about the program that you run and what that's like, kind of the experience? Because one thing that I thought was really fascinating is that you said that only about 10% of the people in the program are going to go on to do this for a living. And I think because, we already talked about this a little bit, people do get so excited when they start tapping into this and realize how magical the world is. We're kind of rediscovering our magic, and all of a sudden you're almost in the state of euphoria, really, where it's, it just feels like that aha, like I feel home and I just want to keep doing this, and it's great. What made you decide to found your own program first, and how you came to actually decide that you were going to establish your own school, and then what that experience is like for someone who is going through it or participating in it?
Absolutely. And I love that you were just talking about the euphoria that you feel when you have the experiences. I just wanted, this popped in sort of from Spirit.
Yes,
so I want to be sure
please.
to make a note of this
Spirit
for you
is
guys.
welcome.
As you guys know, and same goes for Natalie too. Like when we're doing this, messages are coming in, we're talking about this stuff. So Spirit just wanted me to talk about how when you talked about feeling that euphoria, that's that feeling that is us feeling our spirituality running through us. Like that is that sensation of, oh my gosh, I have a new set of gifts that's come online, or that remembrance of like, God, I feel like I've known this before and it's been gone and now it's back, right? That feeling is that feeling of Spirit kind of running through us and channeling through us all. It's the same feeling when you're creating or when you're in that flow state after a long run or whatever your jam is that gets you to that kind of euphoric state. And yeah, I mean, that's the beauty and the compel, hopefully, for lots of people to really turn towards their spiritual nature and find those kinds of feelings within them, because that's like the satisfaction. And I mean, I've never felt more alive than when I'm channeling Spirit. It's really special. Anyway, I just wanted to gush about that a little bit.
Thank you.
Sure. So when I was in psychic school, loved the program, really appreciated my teachers. It's just kind of the kind of person that I am. I can be fairly analytical and have a lot of Virgo in my chart for anybody that knows astrology that's listening.
That would be Natalie.
So I have a stellium of Virgo, 7 points of Virgo in my chart, not just a stellium of 3. And then I have a stellium of Scorpio of 5. So I'm very Virgo with a Scorpio moon. So yeah, that might explain some stuff about me, Natalie, to you in a snapshot. So when I was in school, I was kind of thinking about what was working, what wasn't working for me with this program. And being someone that was commuting, a couple hours away for a weekend to class, I wasn't proximal to the school. I was not able to go to the weekly seances that they ran where I could have gotten that experience and be practicing in a group since I lived out of state. And so for me, I had a sense that I was going to teach people and help people, and I really didn't think it was going to happen so fast. So I opened my business in January of 11, and it was in 2012, about a year and a half later, that I had a student present. And she had just come out of, she had recently come out of grad school to be a counselor, a mental health counselor, and had also just recently had a baby. Unfortunately, had 2 near-death experiences. She died twice in the hospital with having her child. And when she came out of all of that and came home and then was trying to open up her therapy practice for the first time with a new baby, she was seeing spirits everywhere. And so she showed up, and she's since passed away. Anyway, when she showed up, she was like, help me, because they're going to like institutionalize me if I tell any of my, supervisors or any other fellow therapists that I'm seeing spirits. And so she was my first student, and then there was another student right then. So that's when I started the program. And so I just started kind of teaching her and trying to figure out how to teach her to the level where she was from where I was, because I was fresh in it at that time. But it didn't take long. I started running. I realized what was missing from even just, consults with her and coaching sessions with her on this and the other student, that once I had enough, I had 3 or 4 people, I started running in 13, the what I call now the development circles. So I would run just a few times a month, regular circles where we would all meet and sit and read each other. And so that's really how it started, and it's really just taken off. I mean, it's happened over time, and it's been all kinds of things, but it's gotten to the point now where it was in person until 17, and then I moved it all online in 2017. A few hiccups with that, especially some students that have been used to learning in person. When they came online, it felt harder, and they just weren't up for kind of persevering through that, which is fine. But really, it's just kind of amazing how it's taken off. So I was doing it on a conference call line in 17. Spirit was like, hey, in 19, get on Zoom. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll try Zoom. And then COVID happened, and I'm like, I'm glad I tried Zoom. And, so it's been all on that since. And we meet on audio. We don't do video. And it really helps people. They feel less self-conscious because they can just sort of be, laying around in their pajamas or have an eye mask on if they need that for depth of state, right, in the meditation and such to really get there with their skills. So people can be in their natural environment, not have to be self-conscious about how they're looking and such. But also, it doesn't give you those obvious visual clues for your psychic process. And so it really, it sends you deep into your psychic skills. Like, you've got to rely on your psychic skills. And so I run 7 development circles a week. I've got 25 people in the program now, but I've had many hundreds come through over the last 13, 14 years. And there are usually no more than maybe 10 people on a circle, but it's usually around 6 people. If it's a large group, we'll split it in 2 with one of my apprentices. But so I'll lead us through a grounding meditation, and then we'll get into just basically reading each person. And so people are sitting quietly, just opening up to their psychic skills and allowing stuff to come in and then offering the messages. From where I sit, and the reason that I developed the program this way, so it's very experiential. It's focused on people, me helping to facilitate and cultivate these experiences for people to have. It's to build confidence, period. When you have that feedback, immediate feedback loop, when you're offering a message from a peer, right? So new students will come in and they'll go, I don't know what this is, but I'm just going to deliver it. And they'll deliver a message. It might be the one that they were most resistant to deliver. The person's like, oh my gosh, I can tell you exactly what that means.
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know, I'm seeing this green and white checkered flag. It had no context. It sounds like nothing anyone else has offered to you. I'm not getting any more on it. And the person will say, that's hilarious. My husband just put that sticker on my car. It has great meaning because it was a big joke between us, right? So, and then there's nothing better. There's nothing that will assure you of your psychic skills more than when someone else, not Angela, who told me I'm psychic and I'm paying her, or, something else, when you have that experience, when students have that experience of delivering a message and getting that immediate feedback from a fellow peer, that skyrockets confidence. And then that helps skyrocket skills, and competence, I say. So it's what I found to be the best way to learn. And it's over time. And showing up at those 2 circles a week, every 1 or 2 circles a week, depending, on how people decide to enroll, that regular practice in that group, having that feedback loop is what helps to build all of that. So that's really the crux of the program. People also have one-on-one sessions with me and such, but it's essentially, it's a group coaching program for psychic development long-term. And then people have some one-on-one sessions, and, I run some office hours, and we'll do some extra like remote viewing circle and things like that, where we'll practice extra skills. And then when people get to a point in the program, I'll have them doing one-on-one peer readings with each other where I'm not present, again, to reduce their stress. Because I'm not trying to stress people out. I just want people to be able to feel like they can grow their skills and grow their confidence about their skills and use them. And so often that means removing video, removing myself in that process, really to support what the students need to
taking off the Band-Aid.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. So do people, if they're in the Conscious Psychic program, how long until someone's ready to be in a circle? Because I've got to think that's really intimidating at first when you come in and you think, oh, I'm just here and I'm going to maybe get a couple messages, and you're like, no, you're going to start getting messages for people. Like, how does that unfold?
Right away. They have one-on-one session with me, so we can just talk through it before they get on a circle, and then boom, they're on circles.
Oh.
Diving right into the deep end of the pool. Yeah. So, you asked a little earlier, like what it looks like too for students. This is a good story that I've been sharing lately. In August, I had 3 people enroll in the program, and all 3 of these women, they had familiarity with their intuition, and they all kind of felt it in their body. One of them was hearing a little bit. None of them were really seeing much clairvoyantly. One had a knowing and the other had a knowing in a different way. So they all had a sense of their intuition, and they decided to enroll. All 3 of them, within about 2 to 4 weeks, were seeing clairvoyantly. I was surprised by how fast it came online. And they were like, whoa, I'm seeing something. And I'm like, mm-hmm. And so now they're like at the 6-month mark, and they're all like doing practice readings with each other. And actually 1 or 2 of them might go on to do this as a side business, right? But generally, people are coming in and having experiences, especially in the last year or 2, really fast. I don't enroll people that are brand new and have no idea how they're experiencing their intuition. It's not for like beginners. It's for people that maybe have are having experiences or have big dreams, or have had a few brushes with spirit. Like, Natalie was talking about seeing things in the room. Like sometimes people will say, well, I've seen that, or I felt somebody's feelings when they were upset and they were telling me they weren't. So if people have had just a couple of those experiences, I'm like, great. This is you're an empath and you're seeing things. It's your clairvoyance. We can work with that.
Yeah.
So people just have to be having a little bit of that to come into the program. So it's like beginner, intermediate, but not beginner. And then their skills just really take off.
What would be something that if someone was thinking, oh, I want to start working on these skills? I feel like you mentioned meditation. Meditation is a good gateway to hone in, and maybe you'll talk about that. But one or two things that someone could do if they were to finish this podcast and say, okay, that feels manageable, accessible to me.
Absolutely. I will talk a bit about meditation. Meditation is the most widely prescribed tool universally, even off this planet. And historically, it's the most widely prescribed thing to do if you want to increase your intuition and your psychic skills, period. A lot of reasons for that. What I tend to tell people is that meditation in the context of psychic development is about getting your mind quiet enough and your body quiet enough, sort of focused with that soft focus, that you can actually perceive your intuition. And we live in such a busy time in the Western world that we're all just, bombarded with not just psychic messages, which is the norm, coming at us a lot fast, but then you add all the exponential speed of, all the technology and all the things and the busyness, right? So it's in the context of psychic development, meditation is really about quieting down your system and your mind enough to be able to then tune in to whether or not you're perceiving things and how you're perceiving things. So if someone's new to meditation, I recommend mindfulness practices. So maybe somebody's really busy and it's too much for them to go from really busy to sitting on a cushion and trying to visualize a white wall, right? So mindfulness practices, maybe walking meditation, maybe listen to a guided meditation. But honestly, for some, washing the dishes might be enough of a mindfulness practice to calm down and quiet their mind, and then they could turn towards an activity. A great time, especially if someone's more active, is right after a workout, because that physical release in our body tends to clear our fields. So a lot of times I've had students that they have a lot of anxiety and they're pretty tightly wound, and they still come into the program and learn how to kind of decompress a little bit. But I'll say to them, like right after a workout, if there's somebody that works out a lot, sit in the car and just tune in for like 5 minutes and watch your thoughts and see what comes through. So the calming your mind down enough through meditation for psychic development is about really being able to feel into those bigger senses. The other piece of that, this isn't a practical skill yet, but would be really knowing yourself and considering kind of who you are, because it's going to be hard to develop psychically if you're perhaps at a point in your life where you haven't done any work on yourself, or you don't have a sense of who you really are, or how things really feel in your body to you, right? Is kind of what I'm getting at. Because that's one of the best ways that we can really tune into our intuition is if we walk into a room, say, and we feel all kinds of feelings in the atmosphere and in our bodies that we don't normally feel, being able to kind of go to a quiet space for a few moments and just feel into what that's feeling like in our body, sometimes a message can come through that way. Right? It's about connecting with ourselves really deeply. And so whatever can kind of get people to that place is a great place to then start perhaps diving into exercises and such. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, for sure.
There's so many different things we can do. I would say go with personal preference, that bio-individuality piece, like listen to what brings you joy is what I would say to your audience. And follow that, because that's going to put you in that flow. It's going to reduce the clutter in your mind without having to have meditated if that's not your jam. And a lot of times it's the experience that when we're in that quiet space, we realize that maybe we are hearing something, or maybe we do have this fresh new inspiration that's a download that we don't yet know is a download, right? So really calming and quieting our system and mind, bringing balance, and are some of the best bits of advice I could offer to the audience, I believe.
And do you mind sharing, because you've used download a couple times, so for people who might not really understand what that is, they might understand on a computer, if we're going to bring something down and put it in a place in our computer, what a download means.
Absolutely. Then we can start there. Think about if something's stored in the cloud, i.e. with source and spirit, and then it's coming down to your computer, i.e. your brain, you're receiving a download. So we could even call psychic messages downloads, by that definition. When I say the word download, thank you for slowing me down and asking about that, Heather. Actually, I could throw around terms, and that's not helpful when people are listening sometimes without the definition. I would describe it as really just receiving information in some way through your psychic pathways that you have a sense didn't originate from your own brain. So for me, being naturally claircognizant like Natalie and empathic, it's taken me a while to learn that when I'm running around the house in my private time, when I'm not working, doing whatever, doing the dishes, dancing in the kitchen, whatever, all of a sudden I'll have these ideas about like a whole class and a whole, the spirit will be like this. And so I'll write it down, and then I realize that it's a download because it just sort of comes in fairly completely. And it's just a knowing. There can be we can receive downloads in dreams. We can receive downloads and know that we got information and know what it is. More often than not, it might just be a weird fuzzy-headed feeling and we don't even realize we've had a download, but that's been what's going on. So it's a term that we use to just really refer to receiving information from spirit, and it tends to be something that we haven't asked for. So like I wouldn't call a download when I go in directly and ask spirit a question about something, which I do all the time. I dialogue with spirit a lot throughout the day, for myself, not even, of course, on behalf of my clients. I wouldn't call that a download. A download is more spontaneous from my definition, that we just sort of spontaneously receive, or it's there, or we wake up having had a dream and we're like, okay, there it is. There's a complete idea for a book, right? So that's how I would describe download.
Okay. And I think it was really important too when you talk about writing it down, because I feel like that happens to me a lot, where we all have these great ideas and we think, oh, I'll remember that. And then poof, it's gone. Once you switch your brain over to like, oh, I've got to go, finish making dinner. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what was that thing? And it's gone. Is that something that you can strengthen over time, of being like a psychic recall button or something? Or is it kind of, if you don't capture it, might be gone?
Yes, intention. So intend that you're going to remember it if you don't write it down, or if you haven't written it down and you forget it, just pause, get clear in your mind and ask spirit, please bring in that download again, or intend, I'm going to receive that download again today, right? So you can work with intention, or you can ask in that way. But I'll tell you, who probably organically knows what a download is without calling it that would be artists and writers. So it's also, downloads can also look like, and this happens a lot when I write like a newsletter, I'll go back and reread it and I'm like, did I write that? It's like it was channeled or a download, right? And I would say writers and artists probably relate to that they get into that flow state where they're just kind of expressing their art or their writing, and they're not really having a sense that they're trying to do it. And so those could be seen as downloads too.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this term, divine inspiration. And so a lot of people would be familiar with that. And that's how I see downloads as well, that it can be this spark of inspiration or new insight, as well as like a very clear message or idea.
Well said. I love that. And yeah, inspiration, the base of that word is in spirit. It's from spirit. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I never thought about that. So as we wrap up, I got this message, so I wanted to share. This just in. Beep, beep. So today is actually the anniversary of my beloved grandmother, my granny, who was my second parent, of her passing 17 years ago. And she wanted me to mention that and then remind me that she's here. And I'm just curious if anything popped in for you, that, because in real time, of course, I want to experience your amazing gift.
Absolutely. Thank you. What was your grandmom's first name, please?
Kathleen.
Kathleen. I like to repeat the name to make sure that I have the right person. She's very proud of you. And she's standing here smiling and waving, like, because we're, recording. And she's like, hi, kind of like wanting to be part of the whole scene. And just really happy and proud for you. She's like, I'm delighted. She just looks really, really happy, and she's beaming for you. She's really proud of you. She sends her love, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, and what a joyous synchronicity to be recording on the day. It's so significant for you guys.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And with someone who does this work and can get those kind of messages. So I had to bring that up. So thank you. Thank you for,
She's sweet. She's walking away because she understands that we're having this conversation together. And so she's saying to you, I'll be back. I'll be back. I'll talk to you later. Just real casual and fruity. Yeah, she's really
I'm
sweet.
here all the time.
She's telling me that you talk to her all the time.
I do.
Yeah. So she's like, we do this all the time. Yeah. So yeah, she's talking back.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that with me, humoring me for a moment. Thank you so much. I think everyone who's listening to this is walking away with just so much guidance, and I can't wait to dig into some other topics because I think, we could have talked about a dozen different things. You're so multifaceted, so I can't wait to have you on again, but appreciate everything you shared and really educating us on all things psychic, and just so grateful for you and all of your abilities and the work that you're doing in the world through your program, and even just all of the people you're meeting with one-on-one. So thank you for that.
You are welcome. And it is my pleasure and honor to be here with you, Heather and Natalie. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And so we will be sharing more about Angela's Conscious Psychic program and how you can find her. And we'll post all the links, and any favorite place you like people to reach you at.
My website, energyintuit.com.
Okay. And she has a beautiful newsletter. I love when it pops into my inbox. It always feels like it's divinely timed information that I need to hear. So definitely sign up for that. Thanks. Thanks, Angela.
You're welcome. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Heather. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your precious day to listen to our podcast. If this episode resonated with you, we would love for you to share it with someone you love. That would mean the world to us. Also, if you feel called, please follow our show so you will know when a new episode drops. If you want to go one step further, you can even rate this episode, as it allows our podcast to find its way to others. Lastly, we've done our best to share resources that you might find helpful in the show notes, whether that's a book recommendation or a website we referenced during the episode, a free resource, or more information on a guest who took their time to speak with us and share their knowledge. We would love for you to support their work too. You can find more information on our podcast website at becomingspiritual.me. We love you and can't wait for you to hear the next episode. Until then, know you have a place where you are welcome and you are loved. Welcome home.